Secret Stories, Episode 2, Lights in the Darkness. Welcome back to Secret Stories. I'm Mary Cacciapaglia. In this episode, I will share more witness stories with you. But before I start, I want to share a story that happened here at the studio. In the beginning of February, I woke up, as I usually do, in the middle of the night to visit the loo. We are sleeping on cots in the gallery right now, and the front door and window take up the entire wall. Upon returning to get back on the cot, I saw that it was really light outside, as if it were the middle of the afternoon. I looked back at the microwave and it said 2:30. I went to the door to peek out the curtain, and sure enough, it looked like daylight outside. I didn't wake Steve. I shrugged my shoulders and just got back to bed. I did share the incident with Steve in the morning, though. Just last week, while I lay sleeping, Steve woke feeling really sick. There was an odd sound in the building, hard for him to describe, kind of electrical. It made him feel sick to his stomach. There was a light in the window, and he wanted to go get a look at it. But something told him just to go back to bed and sleep. He fought the urge to go back to sleep and lost. The next day, he was really ill and sick to his stomach, all day long. A voice in his head kept telling him that he would be better the next day, and he was. The voice said that has been done to him to heal him. You know, life hasn't been difficult enough for us with the flood and all. We get visited too. Anyway, let's read some of your accounts. Our YouTube Russian friend Haikwomi wrote in a comment, "Let me tell you a strange story that happened to me a few years ago. In the spring and early May, I went for a rest and fishing at Lake Selinger. This lake is located in Russia, about 380 kilometers from Moscow to the northwest. I had an inflatable boat and the necessary equipment. I sailed far from the settlements and stopped on the island in the middle of the lake. I was completely alone for the whole time of my journey. Did not see people. These are wild places. One evening, I caught a pike with a spinning rod. When I started cutting the fish, it was about 10 p.m. It was dark. I used the head flashlight. I accidentally looked up at the sky. Against the background of the gray sky, I noticed a huge black triangle. The object was motionless at about an altitude of 100 to 200 meters. At the corners of the triangle, a red light flashed about once a second. I was very scared. It was cold, about 2 degrees Celsius, so a fire was burning. I realized that the object will undoubtedly find my location. For some time, I was confused, but nothing happened. Therefore, I continued to cook fish, cooked it, ate it. Then I drank tea. The object was still motionless in the sky over me. I continued to observe this a few more hours until 2 a.m. Then I tired and went to sleep in a tent. The next night, everything was repeated, only this time the black triangle was a little further. I was no longer so afraid and watched the object for several hours. The following night, there were no triangles, but bright balls moved in the sky. They were so much brighter than stars and flew along intricate trajectories. I even shot one such object with my phone. I want to add that this area where I saw strange objects is considered an anomalous area. Often people see something similar there. In 2006, two friends and I sailed along the Shlina River. It is located near Lake Selinger and about 50 kilometers. All these reservoirs belong to the system of the Upper Volga. One evening at about 5 o'clock, when it was still light, we saw in the sky a strange, bright, glowing object. It was high and slowly moving. The movement was uneven. We watched this for several minutes. Then one of us, for the sake of a joke, decided to shine a flashlight toward the object. We did not expect any effect, but at the same moment, the object sharply changed the direction of movement. It began to move away from us with great speed, and it flew not in a straight line, but along the sinusoid. We were scared and shocked. So these places are somehow interesting for UAP. Stargazer4625 wrote in comments about something he and a friend saw. I know everyone who reads this will not believe me. I saw 9 120-yard wide triangles. It happened in 2016, 2 days before Hurricane Matthew was going to impact the eastern seaboard. They were moving these massive triangles out of the path of the storm. It was probably a little after 12 p.m. in the afternoon. Me and a friend were sitting outside just talking and listening to music, and then a gigantic triangle appeared, coming over the tree line into an open area that's actually a cemetery. This craft was doing 30 miles an hour and 200 feet off the ground. It had no form of propulsion. It made a weird electrical humming noise. It almost sounded like a vacuum cleaner when it got directly over us. These craft flew directly over us. I had a clear, solid view of them. They had a reactor in the middle, and off each wingtip, about a half a mile away, was an orb escorting them. What the orbs were for, and only my speculation, was that they are part of the stabilization system to keep these craft from tilting. When I say these things blocked out the sky, they did. They were the equivalent of a massive ocean liner in the sky. These craft are made by our government. They have tapped into anti-gravity technology. They have had it for some time now. I always thought the TR-3B was a myth. Even though I had seen other UFOs, I had always been on the fence with these craft, if they actually existed, and they 100% do. They were dark pewter gray color. We watched these craft, all 9 of them, come directly over us. This event lasted for over 20 minutes. All these craft were in a straight line formation. So every 2 minutes, one of these craft would come over us, doing 30 miles an hour. It was the most amazing thing I had ever seen. I'm 50 years old now. Me and my friend always talk about it. We still can't believe our government have these craft. SST6358 shared with us, I too have seen a huge UFO at 12 midday. My friend, her daughter, and my daughter. So 4 of us saw it. We are all females. The UFO I saw looked like a melted silver, like a huge blob in the sky. No noise, about 200 feet above us. It was the early 90s and we had no camera phone, just a Nokia mobile at the time. We went out and came back 3 hours later and it was still there. Both our daughters were screaming and we had missing time and I was violently sick. Black Bass for you to see, shared in the comments. I saw the United States government's anti-gravity on August 30th, 2023 at 9:10 p.m. on Indiana Highway 446. The craft was 40 feet above me, moving west to east, and it had a slight rotation northward. It is a triangle-shaped craft with lights in the corners and center, with the navigation lights red and green, with strobe lights. It is has smooth edges with access panels highlighted, similar to the new stealth bomber. It is painted gray with the lighter color, accenting the access panels highlighted. It was steady in its movement, like it was sliding downhill with no noise. When it moved by, I didn't hear any noise from the craft from inside of my car, and it didn't shake a leaf of the trees as it skimmed over them. It had the same color and type of paint job that the United States government used on known programs. It had the required red and green lights used in aircrafts flying in the sky. It was a huge craft, triangle-shaped and flat. It was too flat to have enough lift by heated gas or any other gases to keep it floating around. It didn't have conventional thrust moving it forward because it was skimming the trees and it didn't shake a leaf. It was traveling west to east with a slight rotation northward without changing direction, and the front end of the craft didn't have a cutting edge on the front of it. It was constant on its edge being rounded and slightly concave on the bottom. It was only 40 feet above my vehicle, and I felt no air wash from the massive craft above me. It was a totally solid panel craft. With the amount of weight it would have required a lot to keep it aloft, and its motion and speed would indicate it was not a blimp or a conventional thrust. Its shape would not be a conventional airplane or blimp. I was 40 feet away from it. I got a good look at it. Jay emailed us the story. Thanks for putting this material together, getting people's stories out there. I've had many of these elements in my life. My siblings and I saw a UFO in Long Island, New York, when I was around 10. I grew up in a haunted house. I read Communion in 1988, I think, and it really shook me up, especially the idea of screen memory and lost time in relation to my UFO sighting. I saw what they call a UAP with my best friend 10 years ago. Something we watched cross the bay and submerged in front of us that we couldn't identify. Most of these experiences I shared with my younger brother, who still has haunted experiences to this day. This was our scariest one. He and I were in a Black Hills visiting my other brother in Leeds around 1983. On the way back through the hills to Rapid City Airport, I was winding one of the 180s around the hills, going clockwise and fishtailed, losing control of the car. We crossed the other lane of traffic, hit the shoulder, and headed for the guardrail at high speed. I believe I was about to die. I became very calm, dropped the steering wheel, looked at my brother, and thought, "I'm sorry." He screamed at me, "Do something!" When he yelled that, the car pulled back onto the road and back into the lane, in the middle of that long curve, defying physics. As it settled, I grabbed the wheel and said, "I don't know how that happened. I didn't do it." Then amazingly, we drove on to the airport and never discussed it for years. We were finally talking about it 5 years ago. He clearly remembered every detail as I described, except he claimed the road curved counterclockwise. He's the one looking over the steep cliff edge, a mirror image of my memory. Everything else matched. This is very confusing to both of us. I'm starting to believe what we remember isn't really what happened at all, a false memory covering up some traumatic details. I may reach out again to see if I can talk to Yvonne, see about this kind of regression hypnosis in New Jersey. I have to decide if there's something there and if I really want to know. These accounts that I've just read have been close encounters of the first and second kind, mostly sightings, as far as we know. I painted a couple years ago a picture of a sunflower. I always do research on my subjects that I paint. In that particular painting, I placed a nuclear reactor in the background because I learned that they plant sunflowers around reactors because they have been known to absorb radiation. I now keep them around all the time because it is thought that the sickness that many experiencers have is related to radiation. I figured it couldn't hurt. Thank you for listening to Secret Stories. Keep sending in those emails and comments, and I will share them for you. This is Mary Cachapalia.